Right now, somewhere in your life, there is a person who believes they understand you completely. Your temper, your soft spots, the exact sentence that can knock you off balance in under 10 seconds. And the uncomfortable part is, they're probably right. Not because they're especially brilliant, because at some point, you handed them the manual yourself. Every time you explained yourself to someone who never earned an explanation, every time you reacted instead of pausing for even a second, every time you needed someone's approval more than you needed your own peace, each one of those moments was information leaking out of you for free, and somebody, somewhere, has been collecting it, whether they meant to or not. Machiavelli understood this better than almost anyone who has ever lived. And here's what most people get completely wrong about him. He didn't write The Prince from a position of comfort or power. He wrote it after he had already been arrested, interrogated, and thrown out of the political world that had defined his entire life, watching men he used to outmaneuver quietly take everything he had spent decades building. He didn't come back from that swinging for revenge. He came back with a colder, far more useful question than revenge could ever answer. What actually makes a man impossible to finish off completely? This isn't a new problem wearing an old philosopher's name for credibility. It's the same game that's been running since long before written history, just dressed differently now. Comment sections instead of royal courts, notifications instead of whispered rumors, but aimed at the exact same weak points every single time. Not impossible to hurt. Nobody gets that version of protection, and anyone selling it to you is lying. Impossible to read, impossible to predict, impossible to permanently take apart, no matter how far down life manages to push him. That question is the entire spine of the 8 lessons you're about to hear, pulled from a 500-year-old blueprint and translated for a world that has traded swords for group chats and armies for algorithms, but still runs on the exact same weaknesses it always has. This is not a lesson in becoming cruel. Cruelty is loud, and loud gets caught eventually. This is about becoming someone the world can throw absolutely everything it has at, and still not manage to take apart. Before we go further, if you've ever handed someone the exact words that could take you apart, drop "unbreakable" in the comments, because by the end of this, you won't be doing that again. We're starting with the one skill every other lesson on this list depends on. Lesson 1. Rule your emotions before they rule you. Every person alive has a short list of exact moments that can knock them off balance. A certain tone of voice, a specific insult, a memory somebody knows exactly how to reopen. Most people never sit down and map that list for themselves. Somebody else maps it for them, through simple trial and error, and once it's mapped, it gets used, sometimes gently, sometimes without any mercy at all. Machiavelli never pretended that a powerful man should feel nothing. That idea belongs to people who've never held real pressure in their hands and mistaken numbness for strength. What he insisted on instead was a separation most people never learn to make. Feeling something and being governed by it are 2 completely different jobs, and only one person can hold both titles at the same time. A ruler who hands the second job over to his emotions has already stopped ruling, whether he notices it happening or not. Watch what happens the next time somebody tries to provoke a reaction out of 2 different people. The first one explodes, raises his voice, says something he can't take back, and hands his opponent exactly the outburst they were fishing for. The second one goes still, doesn't flinch, doesn't rush to defend himself, doesn't give the room a single clue about what just landed. Within seconds, the entire dynamic flips. The provoker is left standing there holding a reaction that never arrived, suddenly aware that everyone in the room just watched him swing and miss. That stillness isn't numbness. Numbness is a man who's shut the door on feeling anything at all, and that's its own kind of collapse. Just a quieter one. What you're building instead is closer to a locked room with a window. You still feel the weather outside, you just don't let it dictate what you do next. Anger can visit. Humiliation can visit. Grief can sit with you for as long as it needs to. None of them get to make your decisions for you anymore. This matters more than most people realize. because every emotional reaction you give away for free is a piece of leverage you can never fully take back. The people who know exactly how to set you off aren't smarter than you. They've simply been paying attention while you weren't. They've watched which words make your voice rise, which silences make you panic and start talking too fast, which slights make you chase an apology you don't need. And once they know that, they don't even have to work very hard. They just wait and let you do the rest of the job for them. Start treating every emotional spike as a question instead of an instruction. Not, what do I feel right now? But, does acting on this get me anywhere, or does it just hand somebody a show? Most of the time, the honest answer is that it hands somebody a show. The moment you can sit with a feeling without needing to discharge it immediately, you stop being predictable. And a man who can't be provoked is a man who can't be steered into wrecking his own position for someone else's entertainment. This plays out in relationships just as often as it does anywhere else. Somebody says something designed to wound, waits for the explosion, and when it doesn't come, they're the one left recalibrating, not you. Not because the words didn't land, because you refused to hand them proof of exactly where they landed, and without that proof, they have nothing left to work with. A reaction handed over for free is a debt you didn't even know you were paying. Emotional control is the gate everything else on this list has to pass through, but mastering what happens inside you is only step one. The next danger isn't what you feel, it's what you say. Lesson 2. Speak less, know more. There's a specific kind of pressure that shows up the second a room goes quiet, the urge to fill it. Somebody asks a question you don't particularly want to answer, and instead of pausing, you start talking, and 3 sentences later you've handed over information nobody asked for. This happens to almost everyone, and almost nobody notices it happening to them in the moment. Machiavelli treated words the way a smart general treats his supply lines, necessary, but dangerous the moment they're exposed. Every sentence you speak either protects your position or gives something away, and there's rarely a neutral option sitting in between those two. He put it plainly, everyone sees what you appear to be, but very few people ever get close enough to experience what you actually are. That gap between the two, between what's visible and what's real, is where all your real protection lives. Talk too much, explain too often, justify yourself to people who were never entitled to an explanation, and that gap closes fast. Once it closes, you're readable. And once you're readable, you're manageable. Think about how most arguments unfold in real time. One person defends every single accusation immediately, filling every pause with justification, and by the end of it, their opponent knows exactly where every soft spot is, because the defending never stopped long enough to hide anything worth hiding. The other kind of person listens, lets accusations sit unanswered in the air, and responds only when a response changes something. That second person almost always walks away from the exchange having said less and learned more, while the first one walks away having said everything and learned nothing useful at all. Silence isn't the absence of communication. It's a heavier, more deliberate kind of it. When you stop rushing to fill a pause, the people around you start filling it instead, usually with more than they intended to reveal. Notice, during a real disagreement, how much the other person tells you simply because you didn't rush to speak first. Their actual priorities surface. Their real fears leak out between the lines. Meanwhile, you've given away almost nothing, and you're the only one in the exchange who walked away holding more than you started with. This isn't about becoming cold or withholding basic warmth from people who've earned your trust over time. It's about recognizing that your plans, your doubts, your next move, and your private reasoning are not public property simply because somebody asked. You don't owe every question a full answer, and you definitely don't owe strangers, competitors, or people quietly testing you a full view of your cards before the hand is even over. Picture a salary negotiation or any conversation where somebody is quietly trying to find your floor. If you fill every silence with justification for why you deserve more, you've already told them how uncertain you are about the number. But if you state what you want once and let the silence sit there without rushing to defend it, the discomfort becomes their problem to manage, not yours. That single shift in who owns the silence can move an outcome further than any clever argument ever could. Most people think the most dangerous answer is no. It isn't. The most dangerous answer is the silence that makes someone wonder whether you even heard the question at all. But here's a question worth sitting with. What happens once you've mastered your words, and people can no longer read what you're thinking? What's left for them to study instead? Your patterns, your habits, the parts of you that never needed a single word to give themselves away. Lesson 3. Never let anyone predict you. Your predictability feels safe from the inside. You know your own habits, your own patterns, your own scripted responses to the same 10 situations that keep repeating in your life. And there's a strange comfort in that familiarity. But from the outside, predictability looks like something else entirely. It looks like a set of instructions, freely available to anyone patient enough to study you for a week or two. This is exactly the trap Machiavelli warned rulers about when he described the two creatures a wise man has to become at once. A fox, because foxes recognize traps before they ever spring shut, and a lion, because lions can frighten off wolves that a fox alone could never survive. Most people only ever manage to be one or the other. They're either too soft to be taken seriously, or too obvious in their aggression to ever catch anyone off guard. The rare ones learn to move like both, sharp enough to spot the trap laid out in front of them, and controlled enough that nobody watching can guess which direction they're about to move in next. Look at how most people handle a new goal. They announce it before they've done a single day of real work toward it. They tell everyone the plan, the timeline, the whole vision, and in doing so, they hand out a preview of every place that plan could later be interrupted, criticized, or quietly sabotaged by somebody who was never rooting for them to win. Then they wonder why obstacles seem to appear out of nowhere right as they're getting started. The obstacles weren't hiding. They were invited the moment the plan got announced instead of simply executed. Picture two men, in the same week, deciding to build something that will one day compete with the very place that currently pays them. The first cannot hold the secret past a lunch table. He tells it proudly, half fishing for encouragement, and within a month his employer has quietly moved the accounts that mattered most. A colleague has floated the same idea upward as his own, and what should have been a clean start is now built against a headwind. He handed out himself, one lunch conversation at a time. The second man says nothing at all. He works the plan in the hours nobody is watching, and by the time anyone from his old life hears a single word about it, there is already a door standing open with his name on it and people walking through it. Same idea, same starting week. One man handed out a target before he had even loaded the gun. The other simply arrived with the shot already fired. The people who finish what they start tend to operate almost invisibly right up until the result is already sitting in front of everyone. They don't perform the process for an audience. They don't need anyone's early approval to keep moving forward. By the time most people even realize something was happening, it's already done, and there's nothing left to argue with, criticize, or sabotage, because the argument would just be arguing with a finished outcome that's already standing there. Being unpredictable doesn't mean being erratic or impossible to work with day to day. It means refusing to let your ambitions, your timeline, and your next move become public property before they need to be. Keep your plans between you and the people who are building them alongside you. Let your results do the announcing instead of your mouth. A man whose next step can't be guessed is a man who's very difficult to get in front of and even harder to box in. Guarding your plans is one kind of freedom. There's a second kind most men never even attempt. Freedom from needing anyone's applause at all. Lesson 4. Stop needing their approval. There's a quiet kind of imprisonment that doesn't look like imprisonment at all from the outside. It looks like a well-liked person, careful with their words, agreeable in every room they walk into, never quite saying the thing they actually think. From the inside, it feels like constantly managing an audience that never stops watching. Softening opinions, avoiding disagreement, shrinking down just enough to stay comfortably likable to people whose opinion of you shouldn't carry that much weight to begin with. The Stoics called this the tyranny of other people's opinions, and Machiavelli watched the same mechanism play out in politics. A leader who needs to be loved by everyone eventually becomes governed by everyone. Whoever can grant that affection can just as easily withdraw it. And the moment your peace depends on someone else's approval, that person is holding a leash they never even had to ask permission to pick up. This isn't a medieval problem confined to old books. It's playing out right now, every time somebody stays quiet about something that matters to them, because disagreement might cost them a small amount of comfort they weren't willing to risk. The truth almost nobody wants to hear is that being disliked by someone isn't proof that you did something wrong. Sometimes it's proof of the exact opposite. The more clearly you stand for something, the more certain people will feel uncomfortable around you, not because you've become worse, but because your clarity makes their own uncertainty a lot harder to ignore. Growth tends to cost you a handful of people who were only ever comfortable with a smaller, quieter version of you. That's not a warning sign telling you to shrink back down. That's just the toll, paid once and rarely twice by the same person. Picture two men passed over for the same advancement on the same afternoon. The first spends the months that follow performing loyalty toward the very decision that wounded him, laughing a beat too long at meetings, agreeing a shade too quickly, hoping warmth might quietly undo what the decision already did. The second says nothing about it to anyone, keeps the same standard he always kept, and half a year later is the only man in the building whose character hasn't rearranged itself depending on who happens to be in the room that day. The first spent 6 months managing an impression. The second spent 6 months simply being the same man regardless of audience. And it is that second man, almost without exception, who gets remembered when the next decision comes around. You don't need to become unpleasant to make this shift happen. You just need to stop editing your actual opinions down to whatever keeps the peace with people who are never going to be satisfied regardless of how much you shrank. The moment your decisions stop being negotiable in exchange for someone's approval, you become significantly harder to steer, because there's no longer a lever anyone can quietly hold over you without you noticing. This shows up in smaller moments too, not just public criticism. It's the friend who goes quiet when you mention a new goal, or the relative who suddenly has strong opinions about a decision that was never theirs to weigh in on. You don't have to fight them on it. You just have to notice that their discomfort is information about them, not a verdict on you, and keep walking regardless of whether they catch up. 4 lessons down, 4 to go, and this is usually right where a video like this starts getting more useful, not less. Everything up to now has been about guarding your inside, your emotions, your words, your next move, your need for approval. What comes next is different. The last 4 lessons are about the structures around you, the ones that decide whether everything you just built holds up once real pressure gets applied to it. Lesson 5. Expect betrayal. Trust systems. Not sentiment betrayal tends to hit people twice. Once when it happens, and a second time, usually worse, when they realize just how completely blindsided they were. That second wound is almost always avoidable. Not because you should walk through life suspicious of everyone around you, but because loyalty, in most people, is far more conditional than they'll ever admit out loud, even to themselves in private. Machiavelli was blunt about this in a way that still makes people uncomfortable 5 centuries later. Sun Tzu made the same point about alliances in war, centuries earlier, from the opposite side of the world. An ally's loyalty lasts exactly as long as the alliance serves them, and not one day longer. A promise made is a product of the exact moment it was made in, and once the conditions that produced it change, the promise often changes right along with them. This isn't necessarily proof that someone set out to be evil. Sometimes it's simply proof that they're human, that interests shift over time, and that people who once had every reason to stand beside you can find, later on, that they no longer do. Taking that personally every single time is exhausting, and worse, it keeps you from learning anything useful from the pattern while it's still forming. The people who get destroyed by betrayal aren't usually destroyed by the betrayal itself. They're destroyed by the fact that their entire position depended on one relationship, one promise, one person's continued goodwill, with no backup plan in place for the day that goodwill ran out. That's not trust. That's exposure, dressed up to look like trust because it feels warmer that way. Real security doesn't come from believing everyone around you will stay loyal forever, because some of them won't. It comes from building your position so that no single person's loyalty, or lack of it, can take the whole thing down at once. This changes how you watch people day to day. Instead of judging someone purely by what they say when things are calm and easy, you start paying closer attention to what they do under pressure, under temptation, when there's something real to gain by turning on you. Words are cheap and available to everyone with a mouth. Behavior under strain is the only honest report anyone ever gives you, and it's usually visible long before the actual betrayal happens, if you're paying attention instead of assuming the best out of pure habit. None of this means becoming bitter or treating every relationship like a threat waiting to happen. It means holding your trust the way a smart investor holds risk, spread across more than one place, never staked entirely on a single promise you can't independently verify. When betrayal does eventually show up, and eventually it will, it costs you information and maybe some time. It doesn't cost you everything because you never built everything on top of it in the first place. Lesson 6. Guard your circle like a border. There's a slow kind of erosion that almost never announces itself. You don't wake up one day suddenly smaller, more cautious, more willing to settle for less than you used to want out of life. It happens one conversation at a time, one comfortable evening at a time, spent around people whose ceiling has quietly become your own without either of you ever agreeing to that arrangement out loud. Machiavelli spent an enormous amount of attention on exactly this danger, warning that the first real clue to a ruler's intelligence is the quality of the people he keeps close enough to advise him. He wasn't talking about a test of raw intelligence. He was talking about the fact that the people around you shape your decisions long before you're consciously aware they're doing it at all. And a ruler surrounded only by people who agree with him is a ruler slowly being led toward decisions nobody ever bothered to stress. Test. The most dangerous people to keep close usually aren't the obvious enemies. Obvious enemies are easy to spot and easy enough to guard against once you've named them. The dangerous ones are the quiet flatterers, the people who celebrate every choice you make without question, who never push back, who make you feel comfortable in exactly the moments you should be feeling challenged instead. Flattery feels good precisely because it costs you nothing in the moment and everything over time, slowly convincing you that your current ceiling is the full extent of your potential. Picture two friends hearing the same new plan for the first time. The first calls it brilliant before the sentence is even finished, agrees with every assumption, and never once asks what happens if the first client falls through. A year later, the plan has quietened into nothing, and he is still calling it brilliant. The second friend asks plainly, who is actually going to pay for this? He finds the one soft assumption sitting inside the pricing and makes you defend it out loud before a single rupee has been spent. That conversation stings for an afternoon. It also happens to be the only version of the plan that ever survives contact with the world, because someone made you test it before the market did. Flattery costs nothing today and everything eventually. Honesty costs you an uncomfortable hour and saves you a wasted year. That same instinct for comfort over challenge has a darker cousin, one that doesn't even announce itself as flattery. Some people undermine you quietly instead of loudly. A comment here, a convenient absence there, right when support would have mattered most. These relationships rarely end with a dramatic confrontation you can point back to. They just quietly drain you, year after year, until you look up one day and realize how much energy has gone toward people who were never building anything alongside you at all. The standard you need here isn't complicated, even if applying it consistently is hard. Does this person make you sharper, or do they make you comfortable with staying exactly where you already are? Does their honesty, even when it stings a little, leave you better equipped, or does their constant agreement just leave you undisturbed and stagnant? If the answer protects and sharpens you, keep them close and protect that relationship deliberately, because people like that are genuinely rare. If the answer drains you instead, you don't owe them a lengthy explanation for stepping back. You owe yourself the standard, and nothing more than that. Try this honestly, just once. After you spend time with someone, notice what you feel afterward, not during. Do you feel sharper, calmer, More capable of handling what's next? Or do you feel slightly smaller, slightly more anxious, slightly less sure of yourself than you were before that conversation started? That feeling afterward is more honest than anything either of you said out loud, and it rarely lies. Lesson 7. Master time, not just timing. Urgency has a way of feeling like clarity when it's actually the opposite. Something goes wrong, or someone wrongs you, or an opportunity seems to be closing fast, and the pressure to act immediately can feel indistinguishable from good instinct. Most of the damage people do to their own position doesn't come from moving too slowly. It comes from moving the exact moment discomfort became unbearable, mistaking that discomfort for a signal that it was finally time to act. Machiavelli studied this pattern across generations of rulers and generals, and one example he kept returning to was Cesare Borgia, consolidating control over Romagna, not by rushing in the moment resistance appeared, but by letting his opposition wear itself down first, then stepping in decisively only once the ground had already shifted in his favor. That's the real difference between boldness and recklessness. Boldness without patience is just recklessness wearing a more flattering name, and it burns through advantages that took years to build in a single impulsive afternoon. Watch what happens when two people receive the exact same insult in front of other people. One responds immediately, needing the room to see the comeback, needing the discomfort resolved right now, and usually ends up looking more rattled than whoever provoked them. The other lets the moment pass without a single comment, says nothing, and simply continues on. Weeks later, when it matters most, that second person responds on their own terms, at a moment they chose deliberately, carrying far more weight behind it than any immediate reaction could ever have carried. Strategic patience isn't passivity, and it definitely isn't fear dressed up as restraint to make it more palatable. It's the discipline to sit inside discomfort long enough to see clearly instead of reacting purely on reflex. It's understanding that most conflicts, left alone for a reasonable amount of time, tend to resolve themselves without your direct involvement, and that the people who insert themselves into every disagreement immediately usually end up more exhausted and less respected than the ones who chose their moments with real care. This kind of patience gives you something almost nobody else in the room has: the ability to see several moves ahead while everyone else is still reacting to whatever happened yesterday. You start noticing openings other people miss completely, simply because they were too busy reacting to notice anything was opening up in front of them at all. This shows up constantly in negotiations, where the person who needs the deal to close today almost always ends up accepting worse terms than the person who's genuinely fine walking away and revisiting it next month. Not because that second person doesn't want the deal, because their want isn't loud enough to override their judgment, and the other side can usually feel that difference within the first few minutes of the conversation. Lesson 8. Build an identity nothing can touch. Here's the lesson everything else on this list has been building toward. You can master your emotions, guard your words, stay unpredictable, stop chasing approval, prepare for betrayal, and choose your circle with real discipline and still be destroyed if the foundation underneath all of it was never yours to begin with. Most people build their sense of self on things the world can repossess without any warning at all. A job title that can disappear in one meeting. A relationship that can end regardless of how much effort you poured into it. A reputation that depends entirely on strangers who've never met you and owe you nothing in return. Applause that was never guaranteed to keep coming at all. When your identity is parked on any of that, every loss becomes an emergency, because losing the thing starts to feel indistinguishable from losing yourself. Machiavelli wrote his most enduring work after every external marker of his own status had already been stripped away completely. His position gone, his reputation in ruins, locked out of the political life that had defined him for years. And instead of that being the end of his relevance, it became the exact conditions that produced the work he's still remembered for, 5 centuries later and counting. That's not a coincidence you can shrug off. It's proof that what actually made him dangerous was never the title he'd lost. It was the discipline, the clarity, and the capacity to keep thinking clearly that no arrest and no exile could ever reach. That's the real difference between a man who's hard to beat and a man who's impossible to finish off. The first one simply has good defenses in the areas he's already anticipated. The second one has built his identity somewhere his opponents can't even locate, let alone attack. Inside his own discipline, his own self-command, his own competence, none of which can be seized, voted away, or taken from him in a single bad year. Ask yourself honestly where your own foundation currently sits. If it's parked on your income, your relationship status, your reputation, or how many people currently approve of you, understand that every one of those can shift without your permission, and when they do, you'll feel it as a personal collapse instead of simply a change in circumstances. But if your foundation is built on the version of yourself you control regardless of outside conditions, your discipline, your self-respect, your ability to keep functioning and thinking clearly under real pressure, nothing external can reach it. Circumstances can still hurt. They just can't finish you because they were never standing on the same ground your identity was built on in the first place. This is what impossible to destroy actually means. Not untouchable in the sense that nothing ever lands. Untouchable in the sense that nothing that lands can ever reach the part of you that matters. This is easier to see in someone else's story than your own, so try it here. Think of someone you've watched lose a job, a relationship, or a reputation, and come back sharper than before, next to someone who lost something similar and never really recovered. The difference was rarely talent. It was almost always where each of them had quietly parked their sense of self before the loss ever happened. Comment bedrock below. If you're finally ready to move your foundation somewhere, nobody can repossess it. Closing. 8 lessons. Run through them one more time. Fast, because this is the part people forget by tomorrow if they don't lock it in right now. Rule your emotions before they rule you. Speak less, no more. Never let anyone predict you. Stop needing their approval, expect betrayal, and trust systems instead of sentiment. Guard your circle like a border. Master time instead of reacting to urgency. And build an identity on ground nobody else can ever repossess. None of this was ever about becoming someone cold, or someone who's given up on real connection, or someone performing strength for an audience that's only half paying attention. It was about making sure the parts of you that matter can't be handed over, provoked out of you, or quietly taken by people who were never entitled to them. That's not a personality trait you either have or don't. That's architecture, and architecture gets built one decision at a time, not because you watched a video about it once and felt something for 10 minutes. You've seen the tactic now. You understand exactly how people get moved, provoked, and quietly controlled without ever realizing it's happening to them, which means that particular spell doesn't work on you the same way anymore. What you build with that awareness from here is entirely yours to decide. Pick one lesson from this list, just one, and give it 24 hours before you move to the next. Not all 8 at once, because that's usually how people end up applying none of them well. Notice one moment today where you'd normally over-explain yourself and stay quiet instead. Notice one moment where you'd normally chase someone's approval and let it go unchased. Small, repeated, boring practice is the only thing that turns any of this from an idea you liked into something that's genuinely yours. If this one hit different, hit like before you go. And subscribe if you want the next breakdown the moment it drops. Drop your favorite lesson from this list in the comments and let me know which one you're putting into practice first, starting today. Until the next one, stay unshaken.